The human soldier Daniel had not expected his joke to spark anything dangerous. He was used to fighting battles, not exchanging words with alien rulers. Yet when he laughed and said the words, "You'd make a cute wife," to the towering alien Warlord, the room grew quiet. Her smile did not fade. Instead, she touched the sealed door and locked it with a simple gesture. The sound of the bolt echoed like a sentence being written in fire. The war had begun only weeks ago, and already humanity had lost many colonies. Daniel was not a general or diplomat. He was a ground fighter, a man who had survived too many ambushes and too many close calls. Yet fate had placed him inside the enemy flagship, standing before their most feared leader. The alien warlord was beautiful, tall, with skin glowing faintly blue under the harsh red lights. Her sharp eyes burned with a strength that made even veterans tremble. She did not look like a monster from the propaganda images humans were shown. She looked alive, graceful, and terrifying in a way no weapon could match. Her armor was fitted, like part of her own skin, every plate carved with symbols of her victories. Daniel could see scars where blades had cut her, healed but never hidden. She wore her history openly, and her smile showed that she was not afraid of what came next. "Human," she said, her voice smooth and commanding. "Do you know what you just offered me?" Daniel kept his face steady. He was trained not to flinch, not to give an enemy satisfaction. But his heart raced, because he realized too late that his words had been more than a joke. In her culture, promises spoken aloud in the presence of a leader could be bound by honor. His careless remark had turned into something larger than he imagined. The chamber shook as the ship turned. Daniel stumbled, catching himself against the wall. The warlord did not move. She remained steady, her hand resting lightly on the locked door. Her smile widened, not with humor, but with certainty. She looked at him the way a hunter looks at prey that has walked into the trap willingly. Daniel wanted to draw his weapon, but the weight of her gaze made his fingers heavy. He realized the weapon would do nothing here. Instead of striking, she stepped closer. He could feel the heat of her body, strange and different from human warmth. She tilted her head, studying him as though he were a puzzle. "You speak lightly, but your kind is known for surviving the impossible," she whispered. "Tell me, soldier, would you survive being mine?" The question was not playful. It was a test, sharp as a blade. Daniel's throat tightened, but he forced himself to meet her eyes. The memory of burning cities and falling ships filled his mind. He had seen his people slaughtered, his friends buried under fire. Humanity was losing the war, but every human soldier carried a defiance that no empire could erase. Daniel did not know if he could survive being claimed by an alien warlord, but he knew one truth: he would not kneel. He straightened his shoulders and let out a slow breath. "I survive everything," he said firmly. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken meaning. The warlord's smile did not vanish. Instead, it grew sharper, almost proud. She reached forward and touched his chest, just above his heart, with one armored finger. The gesture was not gentle, but neither was it cruel. It was a mark, a claim, and a warning. The locked door behind her glowed brighter, as though the ship itself recognized the bond being formed inside the chamber. Daniel's chest still carried the heat of her touch long after her finger withdrew. The alien warlord's eyes did not blink, as if she could see inside him and measure his worth. He kept his stance solid, though every instinct screamed that he was standing before a storm that could not be controlled. His words had turned into a bond that he did not fully understand, and the locked chamber felt smaller with each second. Outside the walls, the war continued. Humanity's fleets were scattered across different sectors, trying to hold ground against a stronger enemy. Daniel knew the warlord had destroyed entire armadas with her strategy. She was no mere fighter. She was a leader who inspired fear even among her own. And now she looked at him not as a prisoner, not as an enemy, but as something she had claimed. That shift in her gaze unsettled him more than chains would have. Her name was Zalira, though to humans she was known only as the Crimson Blade. Stories said she had led her people to victory since she was barely old enough to hold a weapon. Now, she was a warlord feared across 3 galaxies. Daniel had studied her face on holographic reports before. But standing here, only a few feet away, he realized no report could capture her presence. She was too alive, too commanding, too sharp to be reduced to data. Human, she said again, her voice calm, like steel hidden under silk. Your kind resists chains, but you just placed one around your own neck. She circled him slowly, her tall frame casting shifting shadows in the orange glow of the chamber. Do you regret your words? Daniel clenched his jaw. Regret was not in his nature. He thought of the lives lost, the friends buried, the colonies turned to ash. If his words could buy even a moment of survival, he would not take them back. Zalira stopped behind him. He could feel her presence even without turning. Your people are stubborn. That is why this war is not yet finished, she whispered near his ear. But stubbornness can be reshaped into loyalty. Daniel turned to face her, his voice steady. You mistake loyalty for surrender, he said. We do not kneel, not to you, not to anyone. The warlord's smile returned, this time edged. With a strange delight, as if his defiance entertained her, the door remained locked, glowing like a barrier between him and freedom. But Daniel began to wonder if the warlord had locked it to trap him, or to trap herself with him. Her soldiers outside could not hear the quiet war of words inside. It was only the 2 of them now, and every sentence exchanged felt like another. Blade drawn in silence. He realized that battles were not only fought with guns. They were fought with wills colliding in fire. Zalira moved closer again, her armor brushing faintly against his vest. You speak of survival, she said. Then, prove it. Stay alive in this war, and you will prove you are more than just another human corpse. Her hand touched the panel, and the lock dimmed, though the door did not open. Daniel understood the meaning. She had set a test, one that would follow him beyond this room. She would be watching him from the shadows of every battlefield, Daniel's. Mind raced, but he kept his face calm. He had been given a strange kind of mercy. Not freedom, not safety, but a chance. It felt like a game built on razor edges, where every move could end in fire. Yet deep inside, something else stirred. The warlord's challenge was not just a threat. It was also an acknowledgement. She had marked him not as prey, but as someone worthy of being seen. That thought gave him a dangerous spark of pride. As the door slid open at last, the warlord's eyes locked with his. Survive, human, she said. When the fire clears, we will speak again. Daniel walked out of the chamber without a word. But in his chest, his heart beat louder than the echo of the war drums. He had entered the room as a soldier and walked out carrying something heavier than duty. His war had just changed, and he knew it would never be the same. Daniel left the chamber with his step steady, though inside he carried a storm. The warlord's words rang in his mind like the echo of a challenge that could not be escaped. He was not free, not truly. He had been marked. Her eyes had followed him, burning into his thoughts even as the heavy door closed behind him. It was no longer just a war for survival. It had become something personal, and that truth pressed against his chest with every breath. The soldiers outside looked at him with suspicion. They expected to see him dragged out in chains or lying lifeless on the floor. Instead, he walked out untouched. Whispers rippled through the alien ranks, and Daniel saw the flicker of unease in their eyes. Even they could not understand why their warlord had allowed a human to walk free. That confusion gave him a spark of strength. If even her soldiers questioned her decision, then he had already disrupted something inside their empire. Back aboard the human ship, Daniel faced questions from his commanders. They wanted every detail of what happened in the chamber. He told them only part of the truth. He said she had tested him, measured him, and let him go. He left out the mark of her touch. The strange bond he felt, the unspoken promise that tied him to her words. His commanders would see it as weakness, but Daniel understood it was a different kind of weapon, one that could cut deeper than steel. The war raged on. Days turned into weeks, and battles lit up the void of space. Daniel fought on different worlds, leading his unit through fire and ruin. Yet everywhere he went, he felt her presence. Sometimes it was in the eyes of her soldiers who fought harder when they saw him. Sometimes it was in the silence between battles when he remembered her smile and the challenge she had given him. He fought not just for Earth, but also because she was watching. Rumors spread quickly through the ranks. They called him the soldier who had faced the Crimson Blade and lived. Some said she had spared him out of respect. Others claimed she wanted him broken slowly, to make an example of him. Daniel did not answer their questions. He carried his silence like armor. What none of them knew was that each battle was not only for survival, but also for proving something to the alien warlord who had locked the door and marked him as hers. On one burning world, Daniel's squad was cut off by enemy forces. Blaster. Fire rained down, and the air filled with smoke and screams. He thought it was the end, but then the enemy line suddenly broke. Alien soldiers who should have killed him hesitated, glancing at one another before falling back. His men were confused. But Daniel understood. The warlord's shadow had touched even this battlefield. Her command over her people was so strong that even without her presence, her influence could bend the tide of a fight. Later that night, he sat alone by the ruins. The stars above seemed distant, cold, and endless. Yet in their silence, he imagined her voice. "Survive, human," she had said, and he had. Again and again, he endured when others fell. Was this strength his own, or was it born from the fire she had set inside him? The question haunted him, and yet it also gave him purpose. Every breath became proof that he could not be broken easily. The more battles he fought, the clearer one truth became. This was no longer just about human victory or alien conquest. It was about two wills colliding across the stars, bound by a strange respect and a dangerous tension. Daniel did not know where it would end, but he knew the warlord had not finished with him. She had given him a test, and he was passing it. One battlefield at a time. The war might end for others, but for him, it was only beginning. Daniel's reputation grew with every mission. Among humans, he was called a survivor, the one who returned from battles that should have ended in fire. Among aliens, he was whispered about as the warlord's chosen, a man marked by her will. The strange balance gave him power he had never sought, but it also painted a target on his back. Commanders wanted to use him as a weapon, while enemies wanted to break him to shame. Her name. The battles became more violent as both sides poured everything into the war. Daniel led his unit through shattered cities, across deserts filled with burning machines, and into skies lit with fire. Every moment tested him. Every step pressed against his limits. Yet through it all, he carried her words like a brand. Survive. It was more than a command now. It was a bond that tied his fate to hers across the stars. One night, after a brutal fight that left half his squad lost, Daniel stood by a ruined tower staring into the black horizon. He felt exhaustion pull at his body, but his mind refused to rest. That was when a shadow moved near the edge of the rubble. He raised his weapon, but the figure did not strike. Instead, a voice cut through the silence, cold and sharp. "Still alive, human." He knew the voice before he saw her face. Xylera stepped into the pale light of the burning sky. Her armor bore new scars, her eyes sharper than ever. She had come alone, which meant she trusted her strength more than any guard. Daniel lowered his weapon slowly, because he knew it would make no difference here. She had crossed battle lines. Not to kill him, but to see if he still stood. The air grew heavy as their eyes locked again, the same unspoken fire burning between them. "You bleed but do not fall," she said, studying him like prey that refused to break. "Your people call this strength. I call it defiance. But tell me, Daniel, how long can defiance last before it becomes surrender to something greater?" Her words pressed against him harder than any weapon. He wanted to answer with anger, but instead he gave her silence. Silence was its own weapon, one that denied her victory in the moment she expected weakness. Xylera moved closer until he could see the faint glow of her skin under the flames. She reached for his arm and dragged her finger across a cut that had not fully healed. "Pain is a language," she whispered. "Your body speaks it well." Daniel met her gaze without flinching. "Pain is nothing," he said. "It only reminds me I am alive." Her lips curved into a smile, sharp and dangerous. She respected his defiance, but she would never admit it openly. The two stood together among the ruins, the war raging only a mile away, yet here the silence was louder than battle. For a moment it felt as if the galaxy had narrowed to just them. No fleets, no armies, no commanders. Only one human soldier and one alien warlord, bound by something they could not name. It was not peace, not yet, but it was not war either. It was a fragile line that neither dared to cross. Finally, she stepped back and let the shadows claim her figure once more. "Continue surviving," she said, her voice firm but lower than before. "Every life you take, every breath you keep, ties you closer to me. Do not forget that." Then she vanished into the night, leaving Daniel with the echo of her command. He stood still, his weapon lowered, his heart burning with the fire of a war that had become something far more dangerous than he could ever admit. The war spread wider across the galaxy, and every world became a stage for destruction. Daniel fought on ice plains, in molten valleys, and aboard broken ships drifting through space. Each battle carved scars into his body and soul. Yet no matter how far he traveled, the shadow of the alien warlord followed him. Her words lingered like fire, and her presence returned in unexpected moments, pulling him back into a bond he had not chosen but could not escape. Human commanders grew uneasy about him. They whispered in closed rooms about his survival and the strange rumors surrounding his name. Some feared he had been compromised. Others wanted to use his legend to rally broken troops. Daniel ignored their schemes. He fought because fighting was all he had left. Yet deep inside, he could not deny the truth. The war was no longer just about humanity's survival. It was about proving himself to her, again and again. On one campaign, Daniel's unit was sent to hold a mining colony against overwhelming alien forces. The sky burned red as ships clashed above. The ground trembled under the weight of machines. His men were ready to die, but Daniel led them with relentless force. They fought for every hallway, every corridor, every breath. When the colony's shields failed, he thought death had finally come. But then, like a storm bending to a hidden command, the enemy forces withdrew before delivering the final strike. Later, when the smoke cleared, Daniel found a blade buried upright in the ground outside the colony gates. It was not human. It was hers. The markings on the steel shone faintly in the fading light. He recognized the symbols carved into the blade. They were her victories, her history. Leaving it here was no mistake. It was a message. She had pulled her soldiers back. She had spared him again. And she wanted him to know it. Daniel took the blade into his hands and felt its weight. It was heavier than it looked, as if it carried not just metal but memory. His men cheered, believing it a trophy. They saw it as proof that their fight mattered. But Daniel knew better. This was no gift for them, it was for him. It was a reminder that she watched his every step. He could not decide if it was mockery or respect. Either way, it burned into him like a second skin. The nights after that battle were restless. He lay awake under broken ceilings, staring at the stars, gripping the alien blade at his side. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw her face. He remembered. Her touch, her voice, her eyes filled with a fire that seemed eternal. The war was killing him slowly, but her shadow kept him moving. It was as if she had tied a thread between them, invisible but unbreakable, binding his fate to hers. When the next mission came, he carried the blade with him. His commanders questioned it, but he refused to explain. He fought with human weapons, but the alien blade stayed on his back, glowing faintly in the heat of fire. His enemies recognized it, and some faltered when they saw it. The weapon became more than steel. It became a sign that Daniel was no ordinary soldier. He was marked, chosen, and cursed all at once. In the middle of one desperate fight, Daniel caught sight of her again. Xylera stood across the battlefield, her army surrounding her like an iron wall, yet her eyes found his through the chaos. She did not lift her weapon. She did not need to. The message was in her gaze: survive and prove yourself. Daniel raised the alien blade in silent answer. The battle roared around them, but for that moment, nothing else in the galaxy mattered. The war reached a stage where entire sectors burned. Humanity was exhausted, and supplies grew thinner each day. Daniel's squad fought on ruins of worlds that once held life, now turned into ash and steel. He had become more than a soldier to his people. He was a symbol. The alien blade on his wreath back glowed with its own legend, and whispers followed him across the fronts. They called him cursed by the enemy and blessed by survival at the same time. But Daniel knew the truth was not so simple. He was bound by a promise he had never chosen. Xylera's eyes had marked him, and her presence weighed heavier than the armor he wore. He carried the memory of her words like a wound that never healed. Survive. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw her standing over him with that sharp smile. Each battle felt less like a fight for Earth and more like a test set by her hand. During one desperate push, Daniel's forces were driven back to a frozen world on the edge of the warfront. The cold cut through armor and skin, and even machines. Slowed in the storm. His men huddled for warmth, their breath visible in the icy air. Daniel stood apart, scanning the horizon. He had a sense that the storm hid more than weather. His instincts sharpened when shadows moved across the snow. Alien. Troops advanced with silent precision, their banners glowing in the stormlight. The battle that followed was brutal. Blaster fire burned through the blizzard, painting the ice with streaks of light. Daniel led his squad into trenches carved by frozen wind. Men screamed as the storm mixed with blood and fire. Daniel fought with both rifle and blade, the alien. Steel cutting through armor with unnatural ease. He roared with every strike, refusing to let the cold or the enemy bury him. Yet deep inside, he wondered if she was near, watching. When the battle seemed lost, a new force entered the field. Armored figures emerged from the storm, cutting down Daniel's enemies with deadly grace. At first, his men thought reinforcements had arrived, but Daniel recognized the shapes. These were not human soldiers. They were hers. Elite warriors of Xylera's command, their armor marked with her crest. They struck with precision, scattering the lesser troops, and then fell back. Without a word, the field was left in silence, and Daniel's squad lived. Later, as the fires died and the storm quieted, Daniel found a figure waiting on the ridge above. Xylera stood there alone, the wind whipping against her dark armor. She looked down at him with the same steady eyes he had never escaped. He climbed the slope toward her, every step heavy with the weight of what he carried. His men watched but did not follow. They knew this was not a meeting for soldiers. This was something beyond command or orders. When Daniel reached her, he did not raise his weapon. She did not draw hers. They stood in the storm, two enemies bound by fire and defiance. "You saved my men," Daniel said, his voice rough. "Why?" Xylara's smile curved, sharp but not mocking. "Because they are yours," she answered, "and you still live. Your survival is mine as much as it is yours." Her words chilled him more than the wind. She was not only testing him now, she was claiming him. Daniel's heart pounded, but he forced his gaze to remain steady. "I fight for my people," he said firmly, "not for you." Her laughter was low, carried by the wind. "Fight for them then," she said. "But each time you live, each time you endure, you bind yourself closer to me. You cannot deny it. You have already chosen without knowing." Daniel felt the storm rage around them, but it was her words that cut deepest. The war was no longer just between armies. It had become a war inside his own heart. Daniel returned to his base with the storm still clinging to him like a shadow. His men whispered about the mysterious warriors who had appeared on the battlefield. Some believed they were ghosts. Others suspected a secret pact. Daniel gave no explanation. He carried the silence like armor, knowing that any truth he shared would only sharpen the suspicion already forming among his commanders. They did not trust him fully, and the alien blade on his back reminded them why. In the War Council, his superiors questioned him with sharp voices. "Why were enemy elites seen defending your position?" one asked. "Why do you carry her weapon?" Another demanded. Daniel stood tall under their accusations. His answer was simple. "I survived because I fight harder than they expect." It was not the full truth, but it was enough. The council exchanged uneasy glances. They feared what they did not understand, and Daniel had become something they could not control. The days that followed were filled with unease. Daniel felt the eyes of his own people watching him wherever he went. Some soldiers admired him, whispering that he was chosen by fate. Others kept their distance, muttering that he had been tainted by the enemy. He walked between both worlds, belonging to neither. The war had not only scarred his body, it had carved a gulf between him and the very people he swore to protect. At night, he trained alone, striking against the air with the alien blade. Its balance was unlike human steel. Its weight carried the memory of battles he had never fought. Sometimes, when the camp was quiet, he thought he could feel her presence through the weapon itself. Xylara's mark was not only on his chest and in his mind. It was in the steel he carried, in the silence between battles, in the defiance that burned inside his heart. One evening, a young soldier approached him by the fire. The boy's voice trembled as he asked, "Is it true? Did she choose you?" Daniel froze at the question. He had no easy answer. He looked into the boy's eyes and saw both fear and hope. Finally he said, "She chose to test me, nothing more." The boy nodded slowly, but the doubt lingered. That was the danger of legends. Once they grew, they could not be controlled. They lived on their own. The next battle came without warning. Enemy fleets descended on a colony outpost, striking with overwhelming force. Daniel's squad was thrown into the heart of the fight. Explosions tore apart the sky, and the ground shook with endless fire. His men fought with desperation, but they were falling one by one. Daniel charged forward with the alien blade flashing like lightning. His fury cut through enemy ranks, but even he knew the battle was slipping away. Defeat pressed in like a crushing tide. Then he saw her. Across the field, Xylara stood tall among her warriors, her armor gleaming in the blaze of war. Their eyes met through the chaos. She did not move to strike him. Instead, she raised her hand and her soldiers hesitated. For one breathless moment, the storm of battle slowed. Daniel felt the weight of her gaze, and he understood. She was letting him live again, bending the war to her will, not for her empire, but for him. Daniel roared and pushed his men to retreat, dragging them back through fire and smoke until they reached the evac transports. They escaped with their lives, though the colony was lost. To his commanders, it was another narrow survival. To his men, it was proof that Daniel could not die. But to Daniel himself, it was something far more dangerous. Each time she spared him, the chain between them grew tighter. And now he feared. It might be unbreakable. The final stage of the war came faster than anyone expected. Both sides were broken, bleeding, and desperate for a decisive blow. Entire fleets drifted as wreckage in space, and worlds were scarred beyond recognition. Daniel stood among his soldiers, weary but unbroken. He carried the alien blade on his back, its weight heavier than ever. He knew this battle would decide everything. Not just for humanity, not just for the aliens, but for him and the warlord who had bound his fate. The human high command ordered him into the heart of the enemy stronghold. His squad was chosen to lead the assault, a strike meant to cut through defenses and open the path for the fleet. Daniel knew why they had chosen him. He was not only a soldier, he was a symbol now. To his people, he was proof that humans could not be destroyed. To his commanders, he was a weapon to be used until he broke. To Xylera, he was something far more dangerous. The battlefield shook with fire as both sides clashed in one final storm. The air burned with the smell of metal and blood. Daniel cut through enemies with the alien blade, his fury pushing him past exhaustion. Yet every strike, every step, carried a question in his heart. Was he fighting for his people, or was he still fighting because of her? He could not separate the two any longer. The war outside had become tangled with the war inside. Then he saw her again. Xylera stood at the center of the stronghold, her armor glowing with the heat of battle. Around her, alien soldiers fought like shadows, but she remained still, waiting. Their eyes met across the chaos. In that moment, time seemed to bend. Daniel felt the weight of every battle, every scar, every breath he had taken since the first time she locked the door on him. She had been his enemy, his judge, his shadow. And his fire, the fighting around them, faded in his mind as he moved toward her. No soldier dared to block his path. The clash of their armies seemed distant, as if even the war itself waited for their decision. When Daniel reached her, he raised his blade, but not to strike. Xylera did the same. They stood with weapons drawn, but not moving. The silence between them was louder than the screams of the battlefield. It was the end of something greater than war. "You survived," she said, her voice steady in the storm. "You endured every fire I placed before you. Now the choice is yours. Fight me, and one of us ends. Stand with me, and both our people live." Her words struck like thunder. Daniel's heart pounded. Around him, humans and aliens bled, each side dying for victory. But here, before him, stood the truth he had carried since the first moment he saw her smile. Survival had never been the test. It had always been about choice. Daniel lowered the alien blade. His voice was steady, though the ground shook beneath. "Them, no more chains," he said, "no more masters. If this war ends, it ends with both of us standing, not one kneeling." For a long moment, Xylera studied him. Then she smiled, not with cruelty, but with something deeper. She lowered her weapon too. The battle around them slowed as soldiers on both sides saw their leaders make a decision that no one had expected. The war ended not with fire, but with silence. The guns fell quiet as human and alien soldiers pulled back, confused but alive. Daniel stood beside Xylera on the broken field, the alien blade in his hand and the weight of his choice in his heart. He had not surrendered to her, and she had not conquered him. Instead, they had found something neither empire believed possible. Unity born from survival, respect, and a bond stronger than hate.